Thank you for attending our second Brown Bag in the Spring Series. We have two more. The third one will be in March. It will be on the same day as match. So after we celebrate our seniors, please come to this room. It will be the topic Cultural Consciousness and Bias Awareness. And then in April, we have our last Brown Bag for the Spring Series, and that will be creating a safe space for the LGBT community. Now, Dr. Hotchkins has a very informative and interactive session, so I want to be brief in my introductions. But he's a professor in Ethnic Studies program at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. He's also an institutional research associate for access, retention, and completion in the Office Equity and Diversity. His initiatives include an iVillage program that works with K-12 undergrad, grads, and undergrad and grad level students in increasing leadership competency. And he recently teamed with the Utah School of Medicine in cultivating a path for medicine for students of color. So please help me in welcoming Dr. Hotchkins to College of Phoenix Medicine.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
How many of you study phobias? I have a fear of people. It's going to be difficult. I'm kidding. I'm glad to be here. Thank you to every one of you for coming out today. I am honored to be here, to give this talk. I'm excited about it. I have a colleague in the room. So we haven't seen each other in a while. She called me, said, hey, actually I am, hey, think about coming here, talking. It's like, when is it gonna be? It's gonna be this day. I was like, cool, I'll come. I haven't seen her in a while. We were in our doc program together. She finished before I did. I always refer to her as my alpha female. She has qualities that are to be admired and exemplary. And so, thank you, Dr. Allen, for setting this opportunity, for throwing the alley-oop, going to dunk. Well. So, how's everyone doing today? Doing good? Great. I go back and forth in my presentation style. I have colleagues who I have seen talk for 3 hours. That's not gonna happen, right? Part of what we're going to do today is share our narratives and stories to inform what is microaggressive behavior, right? 2007, I am in Oklahoma, and so born and raised in Oklahoma, did my undergraduate studies at Southern Methodist University, Dallas, Texas, got my master's in human relations from the University of Oklahoma. And so I'm working at the Oklahoma State Regent's office. I have a boss who says, I can't make this meeting. I need you to go in my absence. I practice, I get ready, I go into a room, everyone's white, everyone has a PhD. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. So it's kind of like a cultural reference, double Dutch, right? So I'm like this, sitting, waiting for my chance to jump in, right? Do my thing. I make a point, and everyone's looking at me like, why is he even talking, right? Someone 2 persons later takes what I said, repackages it. Let's do that. I knew at that moment that in order for me to make change in the academy, in the real world, I had to get a PhD. So I'm admitted at the University of Oklahoma, which is 17 miles from my house in the University of Utah. I'm going to Utah, right? University of Oklahoma's like, our program's for persons who are committed. They work 40 to 50 hours a week, and we don't have teaching research or research assistantships to teach you how to be a faculty member. You have to learn. I was like, yeah. University of Utah was like, what about that free PhD though? And through the research assistantship and teacher assistantship, we'll teach you. We'll socialize you in becoming a faculty member. I go to Utah. There are less than 23,000 black people in the whole state, right? So I don't know if any of you have children, nieces and nephews, grandchildren. There's this game called Where's Waldo? So Where's Waldo? It's a, to explain it to you if you've never seen it, it's like a collage of images And Waldo always has like a red and white. And you gotta find him, his dog, his homegirl, and this evil dude that always has on black and gold. For a reason I don't know. Black and gold's cool. And so you have to find them. I play Where's Waldo, black version, at the University of Utah every day I go to campus. Right? There are less than in tenure track or tenure, less than 10 black faculty. There are close to 35,000 students at the University of Utah, less than 180 black students. And so, graduate and undergraduate. And so to be on that campus is to be mindful of race and how I move and how I function. Right? During football season, I'm often bombarded with good game, y'all did well. Like y'all, professor, y'all don't play sports. One time, if y'all share this story, I'll say that I didn't say it, even though it's being recorded. One time, I had been bombarded with race talk all week. Student approaches me, good game. I was like, yeah, I don't play football. I coach. Where do you coach? Fencing. Fencing? We have a fencing team? Yes. I'm the head coach of fencing. I went to Oxford. I just went on this long rant. Go online and blah, blah, blah. And after I left, I was like, yeah. That's what you get for assuming that the only way you can construct me on this campus is athlete and black. Right? I can't be a National Merit Scholar. I can't be a Gates Millennial Scholar. Right? I can't be a tenured, full professor. Only athlete is how you see me. That's how I left that interaction, which was microaggressive. And so I want us to have a conversation about what microaggressions are and ultimately how we navigate through those interactions. I want you to think about, throughout this presentation, whether you are a perpetrator or a target. Okay? You ready to test this out? So, I have agreements. These are the agreements as we engage. Agree to disagree? Be honest while listening? Everyone participate? Avoid invalidating experiences. There are multiple realities. Speak without silencing the conversation. Speak for yourself, not groups. Consider this a space of no judgment. Embrace teaching moments. Be open to being held accountable. Allow space for others to speak. Accept your privileges. To be in this space, at this time, in this moment, the privilege is mine to be here talking. But once we leave, each of you are privileged on this campus in different ways. Whether you are staff, faculty, or student, you will not have a Flint water crisis in this city for a variety of reasons, right? So I want you to be mindful that even though sometimes we say, oh, I wish it could be better, right? My grandfather, I'll go home and say, Grandpa, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Grandpa, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. He would always say to me, I should stop going to him, tell him when I had problems. He would say, you could be picking cotton. And when I was younger, it didn't really connect to me, right? But as I got older, it made sense about his subjective struggle, right? Being with his grandmother participating in picking cotton in Oklahoma, right? And so it made me say, well, I got a B- on that paper. That's a lot different, right? And so I'm mindful of difference. While we are having a discussion about racial microaggressions, I'm also mindful that for some of you, if you share your stories about how you were traumatized, it will re-traumatize you again. If you do not wish to share your stories, feel free to not share, right? There were times, and before I even got a PhD, I would ask my grandparents to tell me their stories about being in segregated Oklahoma. Some of those stories they would never share. And I'd be like, oh, I know. And my parents would be like, yeah, some stories are just too painful to reshare because you're harmed in the sharing of it, right? Because we are emotional and we are intellectual, some of this you will process later. And so intellectually you'll say, oh, that doesn't make sense, or that does make sense. And then 3 days later you'll be like, yeah. I remember when I was in the cafeteria and so-and-so walked up to me and touched my hair without asking for my permission. So I get that too, right? So now I keep my head on a swivel. So I've seen people reaching. Hey, Yeah, I don't know you. Don't touch my hair. Yeah, it's hot, but now give you permission to touch on it, right? Because I don't know you, so back up off of me, right? And so, but be mindful as we interact with this discussion, you have an emotional filter that you interpret, and it will impact your behavior. Also be mindful of the context in which you interact. So there are discussions that we'll have in here that you may not have anywhere else. There are discussions that you have in classrooms pertaining to this topic, discussions you have with your fraternity and sorority brothers and sisters, that you have with your parents, that you have with your friends, with whom you are interacting, in some instances will determine what you say. There is a cost to race, and some of us pay that cost for being racialized in ways that others don't every day, right? So just be mindful. If you have, it is okay to be emotional in this space. It won't be charged against you. Please consider the following 3 questions. What is your most salient identity? And or the community with which you identify most? I need someone to answer that question. What is your most salient identity and the community with which you communicate most? Yes.
I'm Native American, but I'm
What tribe?
a combination of Hopi, Tewa on my mother's and Wallapai on my father's.
Okay. Do you see yourself in this building?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
That's good. Someone else? Yes.
So I'm Cuban, based in Minnesota, so I'm Latino, but I'm also Afro-Caribbean. So I see myself as both here in the US as Hispanic and as Black, even though growing up that really wasn't the case because back where I'm from, we didn't have that much separation of races.
Okay. Second question. While interacting with students, colleagues, or clients, what makes the discussion of identity or seeking cultural clarifications difficult? Yes.
I think one of them would be assuming that they don't know where you're coming from. So, yeah, assuming their naivety in a sense.
Okay.
Which
So,
isn't fair.
okay. Someone else? Yes.
I have to deal with stereotypes.
Give me an example of a stereotype that has been associated with you.
Stupid Indian.
Someone has said that to you?
Yes.
On this campus?
No.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
I was going to say, actually, the Hopis have an average IQ of 180. You're part Hopi.
Yes.
It's actually Native American tribe with a higher average IQ than the rest of the United States.
But that doesn't make a difference to
I understand, but
somebody
I'm
else,
just saying to encourage you to.
No, I consider myself an intelligent
Yeah.
person. Always have,
Right.
but
Right? Part of the impact of the stereotype is when I look at you, I don't know if you're Hopi. Right? And so I was told in graduate school, Dr. Sweeney Winchief, when we were there at the same time, I was discouraged from using the term Indian and using the term indigenous people. And so when I look at indigenous people, I don't know if you're Chickasaw, you're Creek, if you're Hopi, right? Last question. How do you believe your actions or words silence or amplify voices of students, colleagues, or clients across various contexts? Silence or amplify? Whenever y'all ready. Example, I'm in class. Last week, there were 5 males who speak in my class in a row after I ask a question. I take to them, I don't want to hear any more males talk. I want to hear females talk. Males are dominating the conversation. Be quiet. Good email. Dr. Hotchkins, I'm offended. I'm transgender. I see myself as having fluidity across male and female identity. And to say you don't want to hear any males talk silences me because I consider myself as both. That was an example of me silencing students, right? Next class, we have a discussion about it. I apologize because I am learning and have to be willing to know that I am wrong and admit it publicly. So when I offend people, I don't put them to the side. I apologize in front of you, right? So, someone ask this question, then I'll move to the next. Silence or amplify? It is a quiet group. Don't be nervous. This is the space where we err, right? So I won't hold it against any of you. If I have the pleasure of seeing you again sometime, I won't remember what was said in here probably. Silence or amplify? Yes.
I think when people who are in a position of power decline to take action or decline to speak, it silences others, and then by setting the example, it is okay to not take action.
Right. So you're operating in collusion, right? When an injustice is performed in front of you and you choose to not speak, you are supporting that action, whether you believe it or not, right? Those are the moments where we have to say, I'm willing to risk my privilege to be in this space to protect someone else, right? And so I need 5 people to give me examples. I need someone to describe to me what a terrorist looks like. Yes.
White American.
White American. From a Hopi indigenous perspective, that makes complete sense to me. I need someone.
Remember Oklahoma? That was one of the first major bombings,
Hey.
and those were white people,
Yeah, like Wall Street.
born and raised in America.
Yeah. 1921. I wasn't there. I know about it.
Yeah.
I need someone to describe to me what a thug looks like. Feel free.
Sagging jeans. I'm going to put on my father-in-law's hat. Sagging pants, ball cap backwards, tattoos, chains, and some language that he doesn't understand.
That's a gangsta.
Kind of like what I look like when I'm off the clock. I don't dress like this all the time. It's a special occasion, right? Somebody describe to me what an illegal looks like.
White Irishman.
White Irishman.
Yeah, there are hundreds, thousands
Mm-hmm.
of Canadians, white Canadians who are living in America.
Right.
There are also thousands of white Irish people who, because they're white, can get by with it. They are living illegally in this country.
So how does the media frame someone living illegal in this country?
Oh, they're, of course, the Mexican Americans, they're the mojados, they're wetbacks, you know, that's what they want people to believe, but that's not true at all.
Okay. I need somebody to tell me what an athlete looks like. Yes.
Tall, strong, lean, muscular,
Black.
sometimes short.
Sometimes short, right? You said black. Depends on the campus, right? What does a psychopath look like?
White male.
White male,
White male.
right? And so, as we think about coded language, right, and what that looks like, these terms are often attached to the context for me is Pacific Islander, right? For athlete, the University of Utah. I had never met anyone from the Pacific Islands prior to coming to Utah. So I hadn't been socialized to see them as deficit. So I didn't know about Fiji, I didn't know about Tonga, I didn't know about Samoa, right? So it was a different level of engagement. Although these are monolithic terms that are coded language that are microaggressive words, right? Only one of these terms is attached to an individual, and that's psychopath. So whenever a white male is associated with violence in America, he is separated from whiteness. He is framed as a lone wolf, he is framed as mentally ill, He's not white, right? Because we wouldn't do that. So even when we have discussions about Dylan Roof in South Carolina, going into the AME church, participating in Bible study first, then killing 9 people. Even after that, immediately, he was framed as, well, he could be mentally ill. This is without diagnosis, right? He's a lone wolf, he could be seen as mentally ill. The excuses begin to be made about how his actions are different and separated from whiteness, when all these other terms are directly attached to them. There's one, Latinos are illegal, right? Which is why I have colleagues, this is cousin to racial microaggressions. I have colleagues who are Latino who are offended by the question, where are you from? I hear that question differently because I'm from Oklahoma, not from Utah. I just associate. So I'm cool. Yeah, I'm from Oklahoma, I'm not from here when they ask me. But they get a barrage of questions, where you from? I'm from Salt Lake, but like, where you from? I'm from the West Side, but like, where you from? Right? I'm not, they hear that as you're other. You're here illegally. You're not supposed to be here. You don't have a place in America, right? So it impacts them differently. What is this a picture of? Can you bring the lights down? I don't know if everybody can see it. Well, I don't know how to do lights. Can y'all see it in the back? If you can see the picture, then we good. So we good, they can see it.
Are you sure?
Yeah. What's that a picture of? Of eggs? Okay. Have some of you, have you had lunch yet? Oh, okay. Usually when people are hungry, they say eggs. But what is it a picture of? It is obvious that it is a picture of eggs, but what do you see?
One of these things is not like the other.
You see difference? What else?
Segregation.
You see
Segregation.
segregation? What else?
Exclusion.
Exclusion?
Right, it's 1 versus 3.
1 versus 3. What else?
The brown one's bigger.
The brown one's bigger. What else? Yes.
I see a leader.
You see a leader. That was the first positive answer. What else?
Diversity.
Diversity. I had this one sister say, that's black feminist thought right there. That's the white folks following the black sister. I was like, okay. I never heard that, but that's a subjective perspective. So I can appreciate that. What else do you see?
That group's incomplete, that one should fit.
That one should fit in that group.
Yeah, should, there's space for it.
Okay. Should it have to change into white to fit?
Nope, just this. Might have to shrink a little.
Might have to shrink a little. Okay? So there needs to be an alteration of the darker egg to fit in. Okay? What else? Again, this is participatory, so feel free to jump in.
I've never seen eggs stand up by themselves. That's impressive.
Right? It is.
They're tall.
It is.
On its own, those need others to be tall.
There have been, I've asked this question, I've been asking it for 6 years, right? So there are a variety of examples of answers based on people's perspectives, right? Most of which the responses are negative, right? It is exclusion, it is not leadership, right? Today, we're going to try to talk about racial microaggressions. What do they look like? Again, I want you to think about what are the contributing factors, who are perpetrators, and who are targets. So I'm mindful of Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality, 1988, that begins to give us a perspective of I am not just woman and I am not just black, right? I live at the intersections for those identities. So I am mindful that in a room with black women in that room, because I am male, my presence may silence their voices. I had a discussion with a colleague, and we got into it, right? Because I wasn't ready. She said, the best you can hope to be is an anti-sexist sexist. What you say to me? She said, the best you can hope to be is an anti-sexist sexist. I was mad. That meeting was over. I left. About 60 days later, I had a chance, so intellectually I processed it immediately. I thought about it, and And I realized that as a male, when I'm in a room of black women, I benefit in ways that they don't. The fact that everyone's black is irrelevant. It could be the patriarch, sexism comes in the room with me when I'm in that space, right? So at the intersections, we are perpetrator and target. So I am heterosexual. I have benefits to that. In Utah, being Christian, in a Mormon space, I am target, right? And so just be mindful of the ways in which you are privileged and the ways you are not, based on the mere location of your body, right? And how that impacts you. So, the definition of racial microaggressions has evolved over time. Typically what happens is scholars do research, they locate, if I am a qualitative researcher, so I am interested in your narratives about how you experience the world around you, right? So Chester Pierce is doing race work in the 60s and 70s. And he critiques racism. He sees racism as a public and a mental illness. It's based on a delusion or a false belief in spite of contrary evidence that innate inferiority correlates with darker skin color. He argues that in examining racism, one must look not for the gross and the obvious, but the subtle cumulative mini assault is the substance of today's racism. Because I'm adjusting to the fact that every year my students are the same age and I'm getting older, I'm realizing that the young students come to me, they haven't seen crosses burning in their yards, right? They haven't, my parents are their grandparents, right? They haven't been lynched for looking at a white woman in a public space or beaten to death because of that in Emmett Till fashion. So they're not necessarily mindful of the difference between egregious and subtle, the subtleties. When I teach class for the first time, I ask my students, how many of you have had a black professor or teacher, K-20? It's Utah, right? So I'm always gonna have 2 or 3 from the West Coast. I'm from California, and I'm like, Orange County or Los Angeles? Oh, Los Angeles. So then I said, okay, well, how many of you have had, some of them said they have had black. I said, how many of you have had a black male professor? Inevitably, it's either 1 or 2. And I asked them, what is your intellectual template for black male prowess? Obama, he's black, he's male, he's smart. I'm like, okay, what is your physical template for black male prowess? I give a list. LeBron, it's a list of people, right? So they don't even have a template for what it looks like to be black and male, right? So for instance, what's your favorite color apple? Green. Some say green. Some say red, right? So my favorite color apple is white, right? So before Apple was created, I didn't have an option to get my MacBook Air. There was no construct for Apple in computing, right? So I couldn't even begin to think about how I would critique or accept an apple that was not edible. The same parallel is drawn to them. If you've never had a black male professor who is intelligent, who would guide you in a learning process, it's going to be a template, right? Context for racial microaggressions. So Robin DiAngelo does work around this term called white fragility. So if you get a chance, Google the term white fragility. Part of the claim that she's a white female scholar, part of the claim that she is making is that it's difficult to have discussions about race because white society doesn't have discussions about race, right? And so I don't have any colleagues that I know that are white that live in a black neighborhood. There are 4 Hotchkins in Utah, and they all live in my house. And we live in our neighborhood where we're the only black family in that neighborhood. So we are surrounded by whiteness all the time. We have discussions about race at the center of misogyny, of misandry, about how black people are framed as less than historically, right? So when I talk to my son and his friends about how do you move through Utah, we got a script that we run through. I'm Osiris. My father's a professor at the University of Utah. He's in ethnic studies. His degree is in all these things that he needs to be able to rattle off in the event that someone asks him, why are you here? No one has the right to ask any of us. Why are we here? But as people of color, as women, as persons who are not heterosexual, sometimes we are forced to validate, to explain why. It's almost the equivalent of let me see your free papers. Right? If we go back to days of slavery. We have to justify why we are here. Right? And so this is her definition. Racism is not fluid in the U.S. It does not flow back and forth, one day benefiting whites and another day or even era benefiting people of color. The direction of power between whites and people of color is historic, traditional, normalized, and deeply embedded in the fabric of U.S. society. Whiteness itself refers to the specific dimensions of racism that serve to elevate white people over people of color. Every time I teach, I look like this. I didn't really realize the difference in white male privilege and myself within the professoriate until I taught a joint class with a professor in the summer, right? Day one, I'm getting ready. Ain't nobody don't pass me. So I come out, I'm ready. He comes out, t-shirt, cargo shorts, and flip-flops. I'm like, we teach the class. There's not even a discussion about it. And I'm thinking to myself, if I came to class with a t-shirt, cargo shorts, and flip-flops to teach, somebody would have got a call that day, right? But right then I realized I don't have the same, even though I have the same PhD, I don't have the same, it doesn't serve me in the same way, right? That it serves my white male colleague. We're both as equally published, both as equally knowledgeable. And I didn't really ask him to the end. So what I did, I kind of, second class, I was slacks and shirt, no tie. And then by the end of the semester, I was shirt, jeans, J's, right? But I didn't have on flip-flops, right? And so it was me recognizing that he is presented to the world intellectually. So the way that he appears is irrelevant. In order for me to be accepted as intellectual, my appearance has to line up with what is professional, right? And what that even means based on who's saying it, right? Current racial microaggressions. So Pearson's work, as all research does, it evolved from 70 to 74 to 80 to 89 to 95. Initially, he framed racial microaggressions as interactions between dominant white society and culture against to belittle African American people. This definition has expanded and broadened it. And so, as Smith, Yoso, and Solizano say, they defined it as one, subtle verbal and nonverbal insults directed at people of color, often automatically or unconsciously, layered insults based on one's race, gender, class, sexuality, language, immigration status, phenotype, accent, or surname. All of us fit into one of those categories. 3, cumulative insults, which cause unnecessary stress to people of color while privileging whites. I haven't had to, my descendants didn't have an immigration status. They were enslaved. So I don't have a history of what it means to be African or black and normalized in America, right? But I do have colleagues who have, I have a colleague in particular that if she was standing before you, you could not guess what race she was. In part, she has a sense of, I don't fit in, but the benefit of being ambiguous racially is it is difficult to lay stereotypes on her because you don't know what group she fits into. So is she Middle Eastern, Latina, Afro, Irish? You don't know, right? And so those engagements look a little different for her. Language, I run a program called A Village that is in 10 schools in Utah, It is a cultural leadership bridge program for students who self-identify as black. I have students in that program who are African, who, because they speak English as a second language, some of their grades aren't as good as they should be, right? Once they make the adjustment to the language, is my expectation that they will blossom. And talking to the vice principal, I said, what is integer in Congolese? She was like, I don't speak Congolese. Exactly. You don't. That's my point. Integer is an English construct, right? So it is easy for you to learn. So your students that are African that you are looking at saying their grades on, what you're not saying is they're adjusting, right? So once integer may not exist in Congolese, it is the challenge of your teacher to teach them, to bring them to their point. Again, I make the argument that you cannot teach children who are in the office because you are incapable of teaching in a good way, so you're sending them out. They're a disruption because they're whispering and you can't even hear what they're saying. You send them out, right? Because you don't believe that they bring value to your class, or you have preconceived notions about what it means to be African. 2007, Sue and a group of his students do a qualitative study that examines racial microaggressions in a deeper level, right? And so it differentiates the type of racial microaggression. Insults are at the top. Behavioral and verbal remarks or comments that convey rudeness and sensitivity and demand a person's racial heritage or demean a person's racial heritage or identity. Again, it goes back to this notion of where you're from. I think that oftentimes we confuse racial epithets. The N-word is at the top of that pyramid, right? So if you hear somebody say that, you know what it is, right? But for me, when I hear students say, "You're teaching this class?" I hear race differently, right? And so it's kind of like reggae. Give this example. My mom hates reggae because she don't know what they're saying, right? But I've tuned my ear to hear racial difference, right? This notion of being astonished that I have a PhD. Sometimes I tell students I have 27 black PhDs in my phone, all senior to me. I can make the argument more intelligent than I am. So to me, black PhD, that's what it is. But to you, because you never had a black professor, I'm the unicorn, right? I'm a black unicorn in your class, right? It's hard for you to believe that I exist, right? Assaults, explicit racial, I can't even see that. I need I need to do this LASIK surgery. Derogations characterized primarily by a violent and nonverbal attack meant to hurt the intended victim through name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory processes. And so part of that deals with, there's this notion of, Gusa talks about white estrangement. There is a book, if you get a chance to read it, it is called Why Are the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? That book is not about self-segregation. That book is about gathering data for navigating whiteness, right? And so in my doc program, I don't think there was ever 3 black students in that program while I was there at the same time. If it would have been 3, guess where I would have been seated right there. Probably been Sweeney, Natalie, Jen, myself, and the 3 black students, right? To gravitate towards your group, whether it is gender, sexual orientation, or race, that does not mean you are self-segregated. That does not mean you're not a team player. That does not mean that you are not wanting to contribute to the group. It means that you see safety in sameness, right? It is a natural occurrence, I believe. But in this assault, there have been times when I had to hesitate based on what I would see as white estrangement, an example. I'm thinking, okay, we have to divide up into groups, right? So inevitably there's a white female in the class, and I'm thinking, okay, if I ask her for her number so we can be in a study group, what is she gonna think? What is she gonna give it? That's awkward. So I'm looking for a Latina now. Because Latina's gonna be culturally we look different, but she gonna be cool, right? And so I don't have to worry about what is being perceived of my action, right? That's in part that's where the assaults come in. Invalidation, verbal comments, behaviors that exclude or negate the psychological thoughts, feelings, and experimental reality of people of color. There are students in the Village program that I oversee. It happens on college campuses too, but they first put this thought in my head as a racial microaggression. They are studying, and they are going to class. They're prepared to engage in the space intellectually. They're holding their hands up every time they go to class, and their white teachers are never calling on them. They are erasing an opportunity for them to contribute to the learning community intellectually. That is a racial microaggression. Usually in a college space, there are some students, and I try to call those students out, that they sit in the back. They sit behind somebody so I can't see them, right? They know how much time they let. So there's 5 students that do all the talking. They're like, yo, God, talk, right? So they remove themselves from contributing. If they are white, that is never associated with they're not intellectual enough to be in that classroom. They just didn't feel like engaging that day, right? So when my students of color are ready, are prepared to engage, and I'm never allowed to. Some in the room, like when I got in my PhD program, we didn't have any black males in. So we glad you got in. You was good. You was black. We needed somebody black. Glad you got in because you was black. That's what they're saying. I'm like, now I'm looking back at them, right? They ain't graduated yet, still. And I'm like, yeah, that black thing helped me out. All that black wrote that 284-page dissertation. Right? It has nothing to do with it. But that's the way that they're framing it, right? And the last one, environmental. Racial assaults, insults, and invalidations which are manifested on systemic and environmental levels. At the University of Utah, every building is named after someone white on that campus. Part of the paper that I'm writing right now about how race occurs in, and I'm dating myself, what I call dorms. I just can't get that up my head. It's dorms. I think it's residential halls. In residential halls, a study that I did, there were African American males in the study. During Rape Awareness Week, it was brought to my attention, and I had to see it for myself. Every single post on that campus in those dorms, the picture of the person who was the rapist was black male. And the black males were like, they're internalizing that as, it's like a wanted post account. You're framing me as potentially threatening, right? I'm hypersexualized. I'm going to abuse a woman in any way, shape, or form. It is so egregious that we need to have a discussion about it on campus. So they're like, so should we even go to that? And if we go, will we have to defend something we've never done? Or speak on behalf of all black males, right? And so those are examples of environmental spaces where you see yourself as not supposed to be there or part of the problem. This is a cultural artifact. I have this hanging in my house. My daughter just turned 13, right? And so because we live on the side of town where it's not a lot of people of color, they're dancing, so they're doing karaoke. Okay, so my daughter, her mom is raising her to be extravagant, right? So we say, how are we going to do your party this year? She says, I want to take my guests to Paris. I said, so what do you want to do? She's like, when they come in the house, they need to have a passport. They need to get their passport stamped. They need to be able to know a French word. I mean, she is just, woo! And I said, okay, so while they're doing karaoke, so they're taking pictures upstairs, and it's just a lot going on. And so I see this group of white boys around this sign. ISIS comes down, they pull it to the side. Are we supposed to be here? And I said, yes. Your passport is stamped. You were supposed to be here. You were invited to come to Paris in the Hotchkins household. This is an example of the response to systemic racism. So we begin to have a discussion about March 1921, what that looks like to live in Georgia, in Augusta, Georgia specifically, in the Lenox Theater, right? Because black people couldn't go to any other theater. So they had to go to the segregated one that they created because white supremacy told them they were not allowed to be anywhere else. And we have a discussion about race at a birthday party with 13-year-olds. And I hope that discussion was taken when they got their gift bag and walked out to their car and they furthered that discussion with their parents, right? Part of me said, I wonder how they experienced this. Because they didn't just get this stuff and leave. They asked her, we're supposed to be here. Yes, you are. Throughout my house, in my office, on campus, I am purposeful in planting starters like this to have conversations. I know people who are passive in Utah, well, 90% of them are passive, about having discussions about race. I am aggressive about having discussions about race, but some people are paralyzed, right, to even have it. I've accepted that the best I can be as an anti-sexist sexist. So when women tell me the ways that I am contributing to their detriment, I own that. I make time for that conversation, right? Because it is their lived experiences and the outcomes from those are saying this is valid for me. Even if I am not the person who is the predator, I need to be there to listen to validate the experience that they're having, right? I want to show a clip. To be a person of color, some of the things that you're going to see in this clip will connect with you. If you are a white person in this room, and you ask any of the questions of someone based on assumptions in this video, I would like you to share your examples.
But you're white. People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So like, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from?
Why don't you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't speak English?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to high dance?
Play banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket. Love white food. No real flavor to it.
Never an upset tummy. You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp. Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my god, so it just does that? No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney. Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow. My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
No, is it Emma Thompson?
It's C-H-A-D, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer. How does it feel to be the total white guy in the office? Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this? I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun. What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried math. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white. I'm whiter than you are. So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to a
white people
historically
are...
white college, so
Okay,
I know
but
about
I
this culture.
backpacked in Europe. So can you see how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to, like, take a really popular rap song and, like, make it a you?
So, examples of racial microaggressions you've either experienced that are similar to the video, or some that you've been the perpetrator of.
That I've experienced people telling me, oh, you're intelligent.
Them saying, oh, you're intelligent?
Yes.
Right, like you could be anything other than that. Okay, someone else.
I've been told that, I could fix my hair a certain way. It was just, and it's a generational thing because the gentleman was older, so I looked like Cicely Tyson and Oprah.
Okay.
Like, it was just really weird because I don't look like either one of them.
Right.
But I think that was for his viewpoint. It was a black female, two black females, and that's all you could picture in his mind.
Okay. Someone else, yes.
Someone told me, oh, you have a really pretty nose, it looks really white.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, on this campus?
No.
Okay. Someone else?
Really good diction,
You have really good diction? Yeah.
but it's from someone from, I believe, England.
Right.
So I don't know how they proceed.
I've heard someone say you articulate really well.
Well,
Yeah.
couldn't be called, being called white is a microaggression. I'm not white. I'm fair skinned. Tall, I'm a Vidishan. Okay? And I'm not Caucasian. I've never been from the Caucasus. I've never been to Russia. I'm Celtic. Okay, so being called white Caucasian could be considered microaggression if I allowed it to be.
Okay.
All these things, what I'm saying is, when you look at prejudice, it means to prejudge. And so the question to me is, how do you ask appropriate questions so you gain knowledge so that you don't prejudge or continue to judge? And so what questions can you ask?
Right.
And I am an Irish citizen, but I do have dual citizenship, so I'm not European.
And so I am not offended by questions that are grounded in cultural naivete, right? There's a difference between, I've had, in the mall, the kid had been about close to 2 almost, runs up to me, white child, white parents, touches my hand, and said, black, 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 black. And the parents were like, ah, please forgive our baby, we're sorry, we're sorry. And I said, I am glad that your child associates difference as black. What would be problematic is what adjectives are attached to black that you are teaching him, right? So if you're telling him black is intelligent, black is beautiful, black is all these positive things, then hey, yeah, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, right? But if you're telling him something else, then it looks a little different, right? And so you are right. Whiteness.
I want to move from without knowledge,
Mhm.
prejudice, or really alpha prejudice without knowledge, to knowledge. And how
Right.
do I do that so that it's in concert with someone and they don't feel offended
Right.
and do it? I mean, I'm always amazed at people's names, last names, or, because of different backgrounds.
Right.
I mean, I can follow this 32 different languages, and I can tell you which Hurrah, Sherpa, what day of the week. Sure. Everybody's Sherpa, and your other name is what day of the week it was.
Right.
I didn't know that.
So I think part of it, so there are two things that need to occur. We have to be diligent in educating ourselves before we even ask questions, right? And so I have been trained to meet students where they are in their knowledge. Most people aren't. So if I'm on the bus or the interactions are different. And so I have to have my level of critical consciousness in a certain area before I begin to engage in discussions. Some people are just naive and they say, what does your hair feel like? Hair, right? But some people, some of the comments that I've heard are culturally insensitive, right? And so then I have to expend energy saying to myself, do I educate this person right now? Because I got class in 2 hours, right? I'm mindful of the hegemony that occurs between professor and student. So I can't go off on you because I'm the professor on campus. We're not at the bar, in a space where you don't know that I'm a professor, right? And so again, like I said at the beginning, context matters as it relates to how you engage. But I have some questions that's gonna inform that. As it relates to our environment, right? So campus racial climate is part of the reason why microaggressions happen or do not happen. Right, for instance, so Hurtado talks about these are the 5 components in any organization at any time. And so you have historic legacy of inclusion or exclusion, segregation, right? So there are schools in the South. If I try to go to the University of Georgia, I will see Confederate flags, which I could interpret as racial microaggressions, right? Plus I can go back to a time when black people weren't allowed to be at the University of Georgia, right? A composition of diversity. Like I said, how many black students are at the U? Less than 180 out of 36,000? What does that say? Or not say, right? I've heard the argument, if black students want to be here, they will be, they apply. Yeah, it's a little bit deeper than that, right? And then we get into physiological climate. And so as black students, as students who are female, as students who are LGBTQ or faculty members, have experiences with racial microaggressions, they begin to say what spaces are safe or not. One of the exercises that we do in the village is a cultural mapping exercise, where I give them red dots and I say, put a red dot, so I have the architecture layout of the school with the floors. And I say, put a red dot on every space that you think is unsafe for you. Put a green dot on every space that you think is safe for you. And when you lay them, when you overlay, I can tell you where the black students are moving in your school and where they are not moving, based on who is situated in that space, right? And that gets into behavior. Once people experience racial microaggressions enough, they begin to say, I'm not going that way, so they go another way. They tell someone, don't take that professor, that person's racist, that person's sexist, right? I always wrestle with the difference between being an instrument for the institution and being a champion for students. If my colleague harms a student, whose side am I on? Do I protect my colleague or protect my student? Right? And that gets into organizational structure. What are the policies or practices that the university has set up? It is often difficult to, for instance, in medicine, when persons are harmed, if I come in and my knee is broken, can you break your knee? Kneecap broken? If you, if I break my tibia, right? So if I break my tibia and I come to see you,
fracture your patella.
right? If I fracture my patella, you can do a scan, right? And you see where it's fractured, and we can get you taken care of. If I come into, I had this happen to a student where a professor was handing back papers, black female, and said, "You did well on this test." I was surprised when I read it. In front of everyone, when the student communicates that to the dean or the chair of the department, we can't measure the damage like we can with the patella, right? And so the cumulative effect of racial microaggressions is racial battle fatigue, right? And so it is defined as the stress that is associated with racial microaggressions that African Americans experience, various forms of mental, emotional, and physical strain, racial battle fatigue. And it has 3 areas: psychosocial, physiological, and behavioral. As I mentioned before, and this is a story that I've grown to be able to tell, I have locks, not because it's cool or fashionable, right? Not because 2 Chainz has them. I was in class 2009, I experienced hearing the N-word in class, right? And I'm enraged. So as I lift up the seat on my chair and I scoot out, there's a white female that said it, not to me, but said it aloud about growing up hearing her racist parents. And I say, I know y'all see me sitting here. I'm not the N-word. But the fact that none of you said anything and said it silence to not even correct her. Because obviously she said it before, but she said it real easy. She said it real easy in class. I'm offended by that, right? Professor doesn't do anything to intervene. That was the last time I combed my hair. These locks are my form of resistance, right? So there's a story that's associated with my trauma. There are times when I am mindful that when I revisit that story like I just did, I risk re-traumatizing myself. And what had happened that I did not think about was after that instance, I was so angry. I went in my office, I cried. I dreamt about that situation. And there were times that I slept for 9 hours, but I was tired. I was more tired because I was reliving the experience in my dream in a space that I couldn't escape from because I'm sleeping. Right? And so these are some outcomes. For instance, frustration, defensiveness, changes in mood, anger or disappointment, headaches, and I would get a lot of headaches, chest pains, pounding heart, stereotype threat, increased commitment to spirituality, which is not a maladaptive way of responding, quickness to argue, procrastination, withdrawal from others. I don't know if there's a way that you track student experiences with the climate, but I would encourage you to try to do some type of beginning and ending year semester surveys where students are allowed to be descriptive, where they can list names of professors, administrators, situations, right? In the interest of time, I'd like each of you to write for me, I'll give you 2 minutes, a 6-word story about what it means to experience racial microaggressions with students, faculty, or staff. These are my examples. Constantly in a state of anger. Yes, indeed, I have a PhD. Practice patience, erase ignorance, not again. 2 minutes. When I hear your 6-word story, I should know exactly how you feel. Y'all doing more thinking than writing. What I'm saying. 2, 3, 4, 7. Do it all. One minute left. I need 5 volunteers in 45 seconds. In 30 seconds. Okay, I can't wait. Go ahead.
It is exhausting being black in Arizona.
It is exhausting being black in Arizona.
Well, see, I didn't say the end. You said the end.
I did say that. Yeah. Right? Okay, that's good. Take out Arizona, put Utah right up in there. Someone else?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How many Catholics, so it's easy to determine a person of color
Mm-hmm.
from a fair-skinned person like myself. But sometimes you can't determine a Mormon from a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And so how many Catholics do we have?
How many Catholics are what?
I mean, the number of Catholics in Utah are very small also. And I know a number of, at least radiologists, basically as their children started raised, left Utah because of microaggressions. So
Right.
your experiences as an African American, I decided to say that you are Catholic. And I love Mormons. I play basketball with good friends and lifelong friends, and so on. But that is a cultural thing.
Right? And so because I know a lot of Latinos who are Catholic, 2, there's a lot of overlap, identity overlap, and so there are identities that are hidden, right? So I can't hide my race.
Right.
There are not a lot of black Mormons in Utah, so people often make the assumption that I am not Mormon and I am not. The religious discussion is one that unfurls differently and less frequently than discussions about race. But we can talk about that after. Someone else? Yes.
Watch, judge, not taken seriously. Why?
Watch, judge, not taken seriously. Why? Okay. Like that. Yes.
Why with them you are different?
Why with them you are different? I've heard students say, I have to put on my white face today. Right? And that is tied into these notions of what it means to be professional. There was times when I would do presentations, I want to get my hair braided, right? And people would say, no, she already hair braided, that's not professional. I'd be like, okay, then I'm gonna put it in a ponytail, okay? But now I've moved beyond that now. So however you see me that day, it is what it is, right? I'm not going to be different when I'm with them. I know what you say when you say that. Yes, someone else? Yes.
Doesn't matter if I'm mixed.
Doesn't matter if I'm mixed. That is right. I tell the multiracial and biracial students in the village, there's no need to adjust your behavior to try to be white because you will never be. Right? So you can learn, you can listen to Taylor Swift, 1989. You can try to be all these things, but you will never be assimilated into the dominant culture. Right? So to waste energy on that is futile. Just be yourself. Right? Because America has a certain way of reminding people of color that they are not white. And will never be. Right? Someone else? Yes.
I am white, do not assume.
I am white, do not assume. Okay, what's that based on?
So with privilege, you would assume that I've had it easy along the way because of my position in society. That would be the wrong assumption. So equal, different struggles,
Right.
different,
But struggles nonetheless.
but struggles not.
Okay. One more person? Yes, you in the striped top.
I couldn't settle on one, but as you were talking, I was thinking something I've heard people say a lot to me, which is you're pretty for a black girl.
Right.
And that's something that's stuck.
Right. And what does that even mean?
I don't know.
Right. And so what I hear is these comparative notions, right? I've heard people say, man, if Halle Berry wasn't black, I'm like, she wouldn't be hot then. I'm thinking, what comes after that? What's that about? Right? But it's these comparative notions of what it is to be beautiful. Right? In America. And so some questions that I want to think about. How do we protect ourselves from experiencing racial microaggressions? If you experience racial microaggressions, what are your options? How do we cope with racial trauma caused by being targeted? And how can racial microaggressions be counteracted? The last question first. There is some emerging literature that is dealing with contested racial microaggressions. And so what happens is someone says something and you respond immediately and force them to explain themselves. One of my mantras is, it's not what you did or said to me, it is why you felt you could. Right? And it goes back to this notion of, this is a parallel, a gendered one. She was wearing a short skirt, so she was drinking too much, so whatever happens after that, she's the reason why. And we all know that's not the case, right? The responsibility is on the perpetrator, never on the person that is targeted, if that makes sense. So one way to counteract is to respond. It is rare that people are calling on, or called an anti-sexist sexist. It's rare that that happens, right? So it is okay to contest. Whenever someone offends you in a way, even if it's followed with a laugh, it is okay for you to ask them, what do you mean by that? Right? In a way that forces them to respond. I found out For millennials, well, so there's a lot of work, there's a lot of body, because millennials stops in some literature in 90s, it being born in 97, there's a new generation of persons who have not been identified yet, characteristics and trait-wise. I believe that for them, the new racism is to have to discuss racism. Right? That's what we're talking about. How do we cope with racial trauma caused by being targeted? Last night, I had the luxury of meeting with a group of students who are here. And so we talked about ways of creating spaces for ourselves, right? What we call and say, hey, this professor said this to me in class, I need to meet about this right now. And we come together. I talked to them about deciding whose trauma, what is the hierarchy of trauma, and let's discuss it. So if somebody touched my hair without permission, that may not be as serious as your professor saying, you got an A on this test? I'm surprised, right? So we discuss that. We organize together, we create what Yancey refers to as ethnic enclaves, right? Where we sit together in the cafeteria to have discussions about how do we strategize to achieve our goals, right? In ways that we systemically are being locked out of. There are impediments that exist. If you experience racial microaggressions, what are your options? And so I don't know what the policies or practices are here at your school, but there has to be some on record, right? How do I file a grievance? What is the repercussion? I tell students all the time, when a professor traumatizes you because of the power constructs, to call that professor out is going to cost you something because they're colleagues, right? So if someone said, Dr. Alley said this to me. So the professor in me is like, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? Just, how can I help? But the colleague in me is saying, come on, that's my girl. She ain't saying that. You just took it the wrong way. Right? Invalidation. So if there's a policy manual, please make yourself a student of it and learn how to practice it in ways that you believe won't lead to a repercussion on a final grade, or you not being included on a research team, or you not being able to get funding to go to a trip to learn at a conference. So it's kind of tricky. The top one, how do we protect ourselves from experiencing racial microaggressions? There's no way that you can protect yourself. What you can do is plan your responses strategically. Paper trails work great. Can't deny that paper trail, right? When you get opportunity to fill out your evals for your professors, when you fill out that eval, you can be specific if you want to. They're gonna know it's you, because they're gonna know that they did it to what the situation was. But in order to change structures of oppression, we have to take hits sometimes. You have to be bold enough to say, I didn't appreciate this, and you're not gonna do it again, right? And so it is okay to speak out for yourself and to speak out for others. I want to show you this and tell me what it is on the backside. What was that? I'll tell you what I think it is after. What was that? What was that going to be?
Racism in America.
Racism in America. Okay, I've never heard that answer. Go ahead. What is that?
I think it's people internalizing and excluding themselves from others by doing so.
I've heard something similar. What was that?
You can only take so much. You can put a Band-Aid over it, the crack's still there, the Band-Aid's gonna fall off. So you're gonna take the next level, has another
Yes. What was that?
I think it was a process of trying to heal oneself, trying to find something that would mend whatever that pain was, but it's ineffective because you're really not dealing with what it is. You know, there's the why are you in pain? Where is it coming from? It's not always something that's external, but it's something that's internal. Hands came out from inside, so there's something in there. So whatever's happening on the outside, we didn't see anything crack the egg. We saw the crack on the egg. So it seems like it's something that's internal. It's what is on the inside of you that's dealing with whatever is happening out here, and that's trying to, you know, it seemed like the egg was trying to heal itself. But that has to be a different type of process, maybe something internal.
Right. And so for me, it is a metaphor for higher ed. The eggs were siloed. To me, it is colleges or professors, administrators or staff members fighting to keep their resources to themselves in an effort to not share resources across higher ed or across the campus that they're in. Always close out, one word exercise. Complete the sentence, and then I'll take questions. Racial microaggression talk leaves me feeling one word.
Tired.
Tired. Inspired.
Empowered.
Empowered. Don't repeat anyone.
No, ashamed.
Ashamed.
Frustrated.
Frustrated.
Can you come back to me?
No. No. It's a snap thought of how you feel.
And did someone already say exhausted?
No. No one said exhausted.
I was thinking of that.
I'll take that.
Hyper aware.
Hyper aware.
Understood.
Understood.
Reflect.
Reflective. Engaged.
Yeah.
Saddened.
Motivated.
Motivated.
Exhausted, I thought of it first.
Exhausted.
You just took my sad, lonely.
Lonely.
I have to say frustrated. I know someone said that.
Okay. Frustrated.
Aware.
Aware.
Informed.
Informed.
Engaged.
Engaged.
Enlightened.
Enlightened. My presentation has concluded.